Welcome to Romera Records virtual cast. Today we have on Terry Manning. How's it going, Terry?
Very good. Thanks for having me on.
So, as I was just telling you, I had heard about you from the Bobby Owsinski podcast, and you were just talking about all these outlandish things like working with the Rolling Stones and Abbey Road and all this stuff. And I was like, dear Lord, this man has done it all. So, yeah, if you could just, I guess, tell everybody about the stuff you've done. As I said, I'm in Memphis, so a lot of people from Memphis are going to be watching this. So stuff like that, people are already going to know what you're talking about. So I guess just elaborate on, I guess, what you've done.
Oh, hello, Memphis. And Memphis is one of my homes. I lived there for over 30 years and did a lot of work there. It's hard to just sort of capsulize a career of years in a couple of minutes. But once I had moved to Memphis from West Texas, I was very lucky to get into Stax Records as an assistant, a tape operator in the copy room. Thank you, Steve Cropper, for letting me in there and being a great mentor. And then it just sort of built up of engineering and then producing and then writing and working with a lot of the Stax artists, Booker T and the MGs, the Staple Singers, recording Isaac Hayes' Hot Buttered Soul album, uh, Rufus Thomas, Carla Thomas, you name it, just so many of the Stax artists. It was just a super privilege to be part of the family, and it really was. Stax was a family. It was. I always called it. It's a bit odd to say it the way things have gone today, but I always called it an island of harmony in the middle of a sea of hate and tension. Wasn't all hate. Memphis is a great place in so many ways, but back at that time there were a lot of racial tensions, a lot of, if you weren't of the certain religion or a certain, well, I had long hair being in a band at the time, and I would get things thrown at me out of cars and yelled at, long hair, Beetle, go back to England,
Oh, wow.
silly things like that. But being in Stax was just a happy, wonderful place. Uh, Everybody just loved each other and wanted to do great music and do good things. So I was very lucky to do that for a number of years. Maybe it was something like 12 years, close to that. And then for a lot of that time, I was working at the same time at Ardent Studios and Ardent Records across town because we were all one big Memphis music family. The people down at Royal High were all in the family. Over at American, we all knew them. Everybody knew everybody in the Memphis music community, and we all got along pretty well. So I was able and lucky to work with almost everybody in the Memphis music scene around those years. And then when Stax closed, I started my own. I worked as a partner at Ardent Studios. I had bought into the business there with John Fry. Then a few years later, I sold that off, bought my own studio building, which I called Studio Six. It had originally started out as Steve Cropper and Jerry Williams' studio, Trans Maximus. Then Isaac Hayes bought it and used it for a while. Then Pepper Tanner or Tanner Jingle Company bought it, and they were using it. And then I bought it from William Tanner at the Jingle Company. And then after doing that a few years, I decided Memphis winters were just too cold for me. So I moved to the Bahamas and actually worked there. Was the co-owner of Compass Point Studios in the Bahamas, one of the great studios of the world. And believe it or not, it's hard for me to say it, but I worked there, lived there, owned it, and ran it for 25 plus years. And it just seems like a flash of time. All of these things just seem like yesterday to me. I could walk back into any of the rooms, any of the control rooms, see any of the people, James Alexander, anybody, just go up and hug and you right back to work. But it was years and years and years of it. So once I left the Bahamas and closed Compass Point, I've gone back to West Texas and living there now. But I was lucky along the way to work with so many artists. And it honestly was as much luck as it was being any good at it, I think. I often think I just was in the right place at a right time. But I worked with Led Zeppelin, engineered and mastered one of their albums. ZZ Top, I recorded in all of their big albums, probably seven, eight, nine or more albums that we had, uh, from Tres Hombres up through the last big one that they had, and especially Eliminator, which was like 20 plus million copies all over the world. So just, and then at Compass Point Studios, we had incredible artists: AC/DC, the Rolling Stones, Julio Iglesias, Mariah Carey, Lenny Kravitz. Uh, I could go on and on and on. The list is insane of the people that recorded at Compass Point. So that's a very brief log cabin story there.
So, one thing I'm interested in is how many people, you know, decided that you're their guy. You know, like I don't know how often this happens in the industry. I know a lot of people say, you know, I've got it's big in hip hop and rap. I'm not sure if R&B did this back then or the soul, but a lot of rappers will have a very specific engineer. They're like, hey, this is my guy.
Right, right. No, that happens. Now, when you compare the eras, for instance, the Stax era, and it was also the Motown era and High Records and all of those things. All of those companies I mentioned there, and especially Stax, having really lived through it, was a record company and a studio and in-house musicians, in-house production. So there wasn't as much of, let's say, Albert King came in, he wouldn't say, I want to bring my guy. He came to Stax for the people that were there.
Mm.
Now, as we go on through to today's era and over the last, let's say, 15 or so years, maybe more, and especially where people aren't in a studio slash record company slash studio band, everything all together in one in-house under one roof thing. People do get guys they like or women they like to work with them, and they want to go to them, or they'll hear a record by somebody else and say, "Oh, I like what he did with that. You know, I want that guy on my record." So that happens a lot more now than it did, let's say, 40 or 50 years ago. But both have happened to me because I was in-house at Stax, in-house at Ardent, and sort of working with whatever came in the door there. And then as I went independent and moved to England for a number of years, worked at Abbey Road studio for more than a year. Um, at being independent, I had a manager and he was scouting jobs for me. But what had happened is exactly what you just said. When I did, I was very, very lucky to be a friend early on with Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin, the producer, lead guitarist, and co-writer of Led Zeppelin. He really founded the band. He was the guy. So, being a friend of his, he got me to work on their third album to mix it, do a few overdubs, mix it, and master it. Then it gets on the radio. It happened to go to number one in the world. Billy Gibbons of ZZ Top heard that. And he said, "Oh, well, I want to sound that." So he said, "I want that guy." So that did happen. Then we had great success with ZZ Top. People heard that and they would say, "Ooh, I want that guy." And of course, by the time I got fairly big, as I guess you'd say, uh, which I feel bad saying. But anyway, I had a manager and he would go out and scout jobs and say, you know, the guy that did this, you want him. So it sort of was an all of those things happen. But yeah, today it's happening the way you just said it.
And something that you were talking about that I started thinking about is yeah, Bobby, you know, a lot of the stories that everybody mentioned, they would all say, you know, you're going to have some good times and some bad times. Sometimes the studio is going to be empty. Sometimes it's going to be too booked out. And I'm just like, how? Because a partner of mine, like he's fairly busy, you know, maybe 4 or 5 hours that he does a day. But, you know, I moved from Alabama to Memphis 2 years ago, and he moved from Indiana to Memphis about 2 years ago. So we don't know that many people, but yet, you know, he's got a good bit of clientele. I'm like, I couldn't imagine somebody like you or a Chris Lord Alge or a Billy Decker. I'm just like, how are you ever not busy? I would figure you'd be just slammed.
Oh, Well, these days it's a different business because especially once the COVID pandemic thing hit. And I think I haven't been in another outside studio, like to go into a rental studio with people all around and working. I haven't done that now for well over a year and a half.
Mm,
But it wasn't because people didn't want to do it. It's because everybody was afraid to do it
mm,
in the way we used to. Because when you're in a session, you're hugging people, you're hanging out, you're talking, if anybody's got it, everybody's going to get it. So we've just avoided that. What I do is what a lot of people are doing now. I have a really nice rooms in my house or adjacent to my house where I can mix, master, overdub. I just don't bring people in yet.
mm.
Uh, After I'll wait a little while longer to make sure things are as good as they can be before I just let lots of people come in or go to them. So it's a different business there. But yeah, at the height of what I would say, the height of the record business, before, let's say, before the internet really changed everything, I remember there was a 7-year period where I didn't have a single day off. I mean, Christmas, Thanksgiving, any holidays, not one single day off, and people clamoring to get more done. I even remember my manager at the time saying, "Look, you could do 2 or 3 projects at once. Let's hire a staff, and you can have those people sit there, and you can just walk in each studio for an hour or two a day and say, 'Yeah, it's going fine,' or 'No, change this,' and we'll do all at once, several things." And
Mm.
I just said, I can't do that. If I have my name on it, I want to either live with it or die with it.
Yeah.
I want it to be what I wanted it to be, fully. I want to know everything that's on every track of every tape. I really want to be involved. So I never got that far, but I did work every day for a 7-year period. The only thing close to a day off would be flying from London to New York. And that's about what, 4 or 5 hours out of your time while you're trying to get from one studio to the next. I I'm glad those days are over. Although it was great to have all the work at that time, but boy, it gets you tired. Oh, fortunately, I work out every day. I don't eat. I eat. I'm a vegan. Okay, there I've said it. But I eat what I think is good food. I don't drink or do drugs or anything. So I was able to keep a pretty healthy lifestyle going, even with 16, 18-hour days every day in the studio. But it's pretty hectic. Um, it wasn't quite like that back in the Memphis days around Stax and Ardent and High and everything, but they were still pretty long days into the nights.
When you were working in the height of things, you're talking about your Memphis time period with all the artists that you work with. Did you feel like uh, there was just certain people that you just like, oh, like I can't wait for that person to let me know they want to work?
Well, in Stax, you were pretty much assigned. I was always assigned what I would be doing.
Hmm.
No, people weren't necessarily at that time because I was still a pretty young kid when I started there. I was 16, something like that. And so when I left there, I was like 28. So all of that time, I look at it now as I was a kid. But and they looked at me as a kid, honestly, because almost everybody was the same age there. Cropper, Dunn, Al Jackson, Booker T, the Memphis Horns, all of the people were close to the same age. I was a number of years younger than them. So
Mm.
they all looked at me as the little kid, even though I was engineering, I was doing good things. And I think they, to a degree, respected what I did. I don't mean that, but I was still always younger than them. And when you're in your teens or early 20s, even a couple of years is a lot. You think, oh God, that guy's an adult. And then later you find out he's 2 or 3 years older than me. And now it doesn't matter. But yeah, I remember being so excited by the artists at Stax. When Albert King first came in, I first worked with him. I was so excited. I'm a big blues fan. I loved Albert King. And the thought that he was coming and I would get to record him just blew my mind at the time. Uh, So in fact, it's a funny story. When he came in the first time, we were doing that I worked with him. We were doing an album called King Does the King's Things, which is Albert King doing Elvis songs, which is a bit odd, maybe, but it worked, and it's a well-known album now called Jam Together. Um, no, I'm sorry, that's a different album, but that's Steve and Pops and Albert. But the King Does the King's Things was all Elvis songs. So he came in, and I had said I was much younger. I mean, Albert was probably in his late 30s or 40s, but to me, he was an old man, at the time. So hello, sir, nice to meet you, Mr. King. Shake hands and all. Showed him the microphone. Said, "Here's what we're going to be doing. Um, I'm going to play this song. The song was "Don't Be Cruel." Said, "I'm going to play the track down. It's already recorded. Here's your headphones. Here's the mic, and you'll hear it start. But I have to go back in the control room and set a level, set my compressor, get everything set. It won't be right at first. I'll have to adjust things, and then we'll stop the song and come back and we'll start it all fresh, and you can do the whole thing." That went in one ear and out the other to Albert. So I start the song, and he just starts singing, and the first verse is the meters are bashing into the red, just pegging the end, and I'm jumping, turning controls, getting the microphone, the pre-volume set, and the compressor set. About through the end of the first verse, I've got it pretty well set, but I looked out and he was into it. He was just singing away, eyes closed. I thought, just let him go. I'll come back and pick up the first verse. And then we're done. So I just let it go. And at the end, I said, "Okay, Mr. King, that was great. But as I told you, I had to set the controls and get it set. So the first verse is way too loud. We'll have to catch that." And he just hit the ceiling. He got so mad. "What do you mean? You weren't ready for me? I'm Albert King. I did it once. That's all I'm doing it." And I was just, "Oh, okay." He threw the headphones down. He was ready to stomp out. No, it's all fine. Let's go to the next song. You were great. And if I go back now and listen to it, I can tell the first verse is distorted a little bit, but it goes right by. It's not that bad because we were on tape, and tape doesn't distort badly. If it was digital, it would just be a mess. But it was so funny but he was my hero, and there he was yelling at me.
Yeah, some people say never meet your heroes.
Oh, well, he was a great guy. I'm not putting him down at all. We became great friends over the many years.
Yeah, I mean, just being able to work with, all these people that you look up to is just a great experience did you feel like it boosted your I mean, maybe not that one situation, the distortion, but did you feel like being able to work with somebody like that just made you feel better? Like, hey, I'm doing it. Like I'm doing the thing.
Oh, absolutely. I look back now on the Memphis Times, and I cannot believe what was going on in that town. Memphis they used to say it's a town trying to be a city, or it's a city that can't forget it's a town. It was like on the edge. It wasn't a big city, but the music in that place, when you think of the musicians alone, not even talking about the artists, just the people playing on the records, it is like a who's who of the greatest session players almost ever. Yeah, you've got the Wrecking Crew in LA, you had great session players in New York, and of course Nashville had their own style and their own guys. But and Motown, okay. But they were our bitter rivals at the
Yeah,
time, but
yeah.
of course I love them. But when you think of Booker T. Jones, Al Jackson, Steve Cropper, Duck Dunn, Willie Mitchell, all of the guys in the Memphis Horns. Over at American, you had Reggie Jackson, Tommy Cogbill, Chips Moments. So many. If I stop, it's only I haven't. There's so many I can't name them all. Is
Yeah.
what I'm saying. It's so many incredibly great musicians, and to think back that I was able to sit behind a board and turn the knobs, and these guys are playing incredible things. I look back now, I think of it as a school. It was the best school I could have ever gone to one day have Booker T and the MGs being a session band for someone else, and I'm there working the knobs. The next day, Reggie Young's come in to put a guitar part on a or something. It's like, good Lord, I don't get to work with people that great anymore. They're great people, yes, but that was an era unlike any other, and Memphis was the place.
So what are you doing now? What kind of, I guess, what kind of music? What kind of, I guess, people are contacting you? Like, what's the bulk of your work now?
I ended up doing a whole lot of rock music over the years. So I pretty much stay in rock music a lot of the time. Occasionally, there's a little classical stuff pre-pandemic. Now I haven't done it since then, and occasionally sort of a country type thing, but mostly I'm into rock now because I with Led Zeppelin and ZZ Top that sort of became my thing of later years. So right now I will get bands or managers contact me, uh, and they will. A lot of them will try to record things at home or record them in a local studio and then send them to me and say, "Can you fix this? Can you make this?" Well, I mean, I'm not putting them down at all,
But
but they want some professional expertise added on
yeah.
because we couldn't all get together in a studio. So I do a lot over the internet now. They'll send me tracks to mix or send me a pre-mix thing to master. I am talking to two bands now, and we're looking at actually going in as a band and a producer and an engineer to record in a big studio.
Mm.
So, and we're talking maybe in about 2 months, we might be doing that, which would be exciting to go back into a big room with people again, and do it like the old days, pre-COVID days. So, but mostly rock music. I haven't done any what I call R&B, which I'm looking back to the Stax High era.
Hmm.
Uh, Now at Compass Point, I did a good bit of like Nas came in, Puff Daddy brought his entire Bad Boy crew,
Hmm.
uh, and the biggest, most shocking session possibly I ever did there was Suge Knight coming in
Oh
and
wow.
doing months. He brought his entire record company, everything from Death Row, the instruments, all the master tapes,
Wow.
the all any musicians, all their producers, everybody, everything came, left LA. This was right after Tupac had been buried.
Mm.
And Suge was afraid to stay, not afraid. I wouldn't ever say Suge was afraid, but he thought it was wise to leave the LA area where things had been happening. So
Hmm.
he just moved to the Bahamas and brought everything. And so I've done a good amount of rap, you call it. I guess I don't know the classifications because we've moved on from the
Yeah.
Tupac era now, but the earlier rap, Tupac type things, Dr. Dre type things of that era. Um, but that was quite a session because when Suge got there, I didn't really know what the whole story behind the shootings in the East versus West and all that
Hmm.
at the time. I just was naive to it all because when you work in studios, that's all you do. I didn't even watch the news. I didn't know what's going on. I only know what's going on my day in the studio.
Especially being in the
So,
Bahamas.
oh, in the Bahamas especially, you're divorced from the world in a way. So a couple of people said, "Oh, don't you know these people are scary? These are gangsters or whatever." I said, "What? What are you talking about?" So I didn't know whether to be afraid or to welcome it, but I said, you know what? I don't care because in the music business, you've always worked with some form of I don't want to call it mafia or crime or anything like that, but I think everybody's somewhat aware that a lot of the music business came up through uh, people that were associated with other things too. So I thought, I've never had problems with people as long as I treated them with respect, and that's what this is going to be. So let's see what happens. So Suge came in, he pulled me aside. He said, "Look, I know this isn't what you do. I know you're a producer and that you own the studio and you're doing all these things. But what I need, since he booked the entire building, 3 studios, everything, total lockout for all only his things. He said, what I would like is if you will just hang with me, stay with me. You'll be my guy here. You can drive me around. You can show me where to go, what to do things." I said, "Oh, sure. Okay." And I started talking to him about not about music, but I said, "You used to play with the L.A. Rams, didn't you?" And he, yes. He was so excited that he was known for football, not just music. So we got along really well, you know. And I did, and I would be driving him around in my. I had a big 14 passenger van, and I would drive him wherever he wanted to go, hang with him, go in the studio with him, everything. And I remember thinking while I'm driving one day, I said, "Wait, about a month ago, he was driving the car, and Tupac was riding, and he got shot, and Tupac was killed. Now I'm driving the car. Uh-oh." But there was nothing like that, of course. But that would be quite a that entire months long session would be quite a book in itself there. But
That's
I don't know how I got off into Suge, but he's my friend to this day.
yeah. I was just asking about the different kinds of music you work with.
Oh, right. Sorry.
So I do kind of want to harp on the two different things. So I guess there's you said you mainly do a lot of rock and then very little of the hip hop. Do you feel like that is maybe an easy thing to do or a hard thing to do, just mixing two different genres? Like, there's different sounds that you kind of want to bring to life in the genres. Did it seem easy for you?
You know, I've never had a problem with that because to me, any music is music, and I either like it or I don't like it, independent of genre.
Hmm.
You know, there's lots of country music I don't like at all, and there's lots I love. There's a lot of rap music I don't like, and a lot I love. It's the same with anything. So I've always just looked at it as making music.
Hmm.
Never had a problem really crossing over. I grew up loving big band music, classical music, then morphed into loving rock and roll by listening to Elvis on the radio and things like that. Uh, Eddie Cochran or some of the early, Richie Valens, Buddy Holly kind of early rock stuff. And when I went directly from that right into the heart of Stax music, which was totally different and didn't miss a beat because I had been buying Stax records already in Texas. I would go down and buy Walking the Dog by Rufus Thomas and listen to it just as much as I would Buddy Holly. So I never thought they were different. I never thought styles were different. Classical, I think, is the biggest difference of things I've worked in, but I love it. And I actually compose classical music for myself. So no, it's never been a problem at all for me. Whatever it was in front of me, I just said, let's make this as good as we can make it in whatever genre it's in.
One thing that I noticed that you were mentioning from the Bobby Owsinski podcast is like how you kind of like transitioned in the industry. You were you were talking about that story where they were like, "Hey, you're an engineer, right?" And then you like start pushing the buttons. How did you transition from each from engineer, production, like all these different phases? Did you feel like that was easy for you because just working in the industry, or was it something that you were just like, I got to talk myself into doing these?
There's a little of that, talking yourself up at night, a little afraid what's happening the next day, and do I know enough to do it?
Hmm.
But I've always felt like it was fairly easy. I love music so much; it's just in my soul, and I'm not like a perfect pitch person or anything like that, but I've never had a problem distinguishing chords, knowing the circle of chords and things. And just my mother was a music teacher. She taught piano. My dad played violin and sang in church. He was a minister. So I grew up with music as sort of an everyday thing.
Hmm.
And I would have to go to church all the time with my dad being the minister. So I heard church music from the time I was a baby. So music was just a natural language for me. And I've always, for instance, I would be in a session and hear a wrong note that was obviously not what was intended. Not jazz, meaning where every note could be wrong and still be right, but hear a wrong note that someone did, and I would stop the tape and people in the control room would go, "What wrong note? I didn't hear a wrong note." And I remember thinking, what do you mean you don't hear a wrong note? Of course that's wrong, and the player would go, yeah, I'm sorry, and go back and redo it. But so I always wondered, why didn't they hear it? And they're here making music. How come they didn't hear a wrong note? And I'm not putting myself over anybody. I just mean that it's like if you're going to learn a foreign language, they say if you learn it as a child, it's just natural to you.
Mm.
Like if you grow up learning speaking English in a house and there's also Spanish being spoken and you learn it as a baby from as a kid, it's just natural. That's how music was to me. It's just a language that I spoke naturally. So I never really felt the only thing that gave me fear of, oh gosh, I better really learn new things or figure it out would be technical things.
Mm.
Like when MIDI came out and everyone's talking MIDI, MIDI, MIDI. I'm going, oh God, I don't know what MIDI is. I better learn it quick. And there's no internet then, so I getting books or trying to figure out what MIDI is and how it works and then go in and hope I don't make a fool of myself. But only technical things. And that today it's easy because you can watch a YouTube video and know anything in 5 minutes. So there you go.
Um, so I don't get to talk to many people with your experience. What are some things that you used to work with? You're talking about having to work with tape and all and consoles was like a big thing, but I don't even think people are really thirsting for consoles as much anymore with the technological advances that we have. So what are some differences, I guess some things you liked about the old times compared to now, and then some things you like about now that you didn't have?
Oh, that's a great question. As we progressed, and when I started, it was 2 track and then 3 track. And then, wow, 4 track machines came in. We thought, I mean, that's it. We've done it. We're at the peak. 4 tracks. What are we going to do with those extra tracks? But that, of course, everyone was playing together in the studio at once, all mic'd and being mixed to 1 or 2 or 3 tracks live. You didn't. The remix was a very different thing in those days as it is now. And then as things progressed, I mean, we of course went to 8 track. Ardent was the first studio in Memphis to get an 8 track, then the first studio to get a 16 track, then a 24 track. And so as things moved, I would look. I loved tape. I loved recording on it. I loved the consoles. I loved being able to sit. I always thought of it as an airplane cockpit, like a
Mm.
big 747 pilot, with all the things to do. And as as I worked with it and loved it, the things you would focus on would be the limitations. Now, I would think we had to be very careful about noise, tape noise in those days. If you recorded too low on a track with the meter not getting high enough, then noise was louder because tape noise is just a given, it's inherent.
Mm.
So there's X level of tape noise. You wanted to rise as far above that noise as you could, especially on something acoustic or a vocal, soft vocal, something like that. You wanted to get the volume up high enough so that you could take over the tape noise. It would be not nearly as apparent because it was never going away. And then we got Dolby's to try to reduce noise, all sorts of things to make tape noise go away. So I looked at that limitation going, oh, if we only didn't have this tape noise, I would be so happy. And then you had wow and flutter, other problems that tape machines could cause. Wasn't terribly bad, but sometimes could be. You had 15 minutes on a reel of tape, unless you went a slower speed. And on the Hot Buttered Soul album with Isaac Hayes, some of the songs were 15 minutes plus. So I was terrified we're about to run out of tape, which we just barely didn't. But so there are all these limitations that you wish you could get rid of. Now those limitations are gone. On digital, Pro Tools, whatever program you're using in on a computer, you can record as long as you want, as long as, of course, it's a big hard drive, but still there's plenty of space on most hard drives. Noise is not a problem. It's not even there, tape noise. So you don't worry about those things. Wow and flutter, non-existent. But now everyone's wanting tape again. They want to go back and get the sounds of tape. So we're always wanting something we don't have. I love tape and I love digital. I'm fine with anything. More important to me is the music, is what you put on the medium, and that's what I'm always focusing on. But the things I love about Pro Tools or about any digital recording is being able to edit. Oh my God, editing is so much easier. Of course, we used to have to take a razor blade to cut one piece of tape to another. I've even cut little windows out of a big 2-inch tape where there was a pop or a noise, and
Wow.
because you wanted to get rid of that noise and you couldn't mute it quick enough. So I'd actually find that noise exactly and cut a little window in the tape, and there was just a blank nothing there. So you do all kinds of things to try to get past the limitations you had. But now with digital, oh my God, comping vocals is just a dream. Any kind of editing is so easy. Any manipulation is so much better. And I love that. But do I miss tape in a way? Yeah, it had a certain sound quality that you can approach on digital if you know what you're doing and do things certain ways. You can get a pretty, I say pretty close, maybe exact or close to exact. But just with tape, a lot of things were easier sound wise. If you just overloaded and distorted, it could be graceful. It could be pretty. A bass drum pounding into the red could sound better than not. So, but you don't ever do that with digital because it'll just and make an awful noise and that you don't want. So I love all the media. I love to use them, but the most important thing to me is the music I put on it. But would I go back to tape if I had to choose one or the other? No, I would stay on digital because of the amazing ease and the things you could do. You can set up a mix, leave it, hit save, hit quit, close down. A month later, you come back, it opens up exactly where you were. Nothing's changed. Can't do that with a console. Even with Total Recall and an SSL, you're going to spend an hour or so tweaking things, trying to get it back where it was. It's so many things are easier.
Has there been some new technology recently that you've just been enamored by? Like I know we've been adding. What was it? SSL has they've got the Fusion. They have their, I think it's called an F8 or UF8. It's a control surface. Um, yeah, I mean anything like that. Any new, I guess, hardware or anything like that that you've been like, wow, this is astonishing.
I'm kind of amazed at the I think Melodyne makes one and a couple of other people where you can take a fully mixed track and isolate the vocal or the guitar or piano or something,
Mm.
take it out of something that's already been mixed. I don't understand that. How they can do that, I don't get it. I rarely used it so far because I'm doing my own things and I don't put things there that I don't unless I want them there. But the technology they're coming up with is amazing. Every day it's astounding to you. Uh, the room I'm working in here now at home, it's not in the house, but it's next to the house that I've had built. It's a really good room with great equipment, but there's no console in it. And
Mm.
I'm amazed every time I sit down. Uh, I use a mouse. Yeah, a lot of people don't like it. They want some sort of control surface. I'd rather, if in my perfect world, I would mix through from Pro Tools through a console. I still like to do that
Mm.
track for track. If there's 32 or close to track for track, I've got a 32 track console, a custom one that I had built for me that I love to mix through. Right now, it's not in this room, but I'll get it out soon. So, but I prefer in the perfect world to mix through a console with hardware outboard gear and a
Mm.
patch bay. But still, coming from Pro Tools, where I've got all the automation done, all the editing, all the tricks that you can do in digital. So I'm mixing the two worlds. But in this room, I'm mixing in the box. Everybody loves it. I like it. It's sounding great. No problems. So it kind of amazes me every time I sit down. Where's my big faders? Where's my board? You know, I've got this little thing here, but it's working great, sounds great, and I don't mind it at all. I love working on it. So, but yeah, I'm amazed at several new things, especially that separating instruments. I don't get that, but I don't keep up with all the new gear that comes out because I've got over big studios full of gear from several eras already that I'd rather get rid of than buy new things. So right now I'm just getting a few things I need in here and working in the box. And maybe I'll sell a lot of the old vintage gear someday.
Are there
I,
any like conferences or anything you go to? Like we're talking about technology, and that's what NAM does. You know, they show you all the new gear. Is there any? Do you like to go to NAM? I know there's like Music Biz in Nashville and some other conferences. Do you ever get to go to any of those?
Very rarely now. I used to go to the AES show every year, and I've been to NAM a couple of times. But in the last 5+ years, I haven't gone to any of them. Of course, recently because they didn't have them live, some of them because of COVID. But before that, I stopped going. I mean, I've even lectured at a couple of those things, done master classes and things, and I'll probably do that again. But I just those shows wear me out.
Mm.
You walk all day long. You're worn out. You're so tired at the end of it. There's so many things to see, and all the gear in those big rooms, those big convention rooms they've got, never sounds the way it does in a studio anyway. So I just don't go now, but I probably will someday again.
Yeah, I've always been interested in going to one of those. My partner Ryan, he wanted to go to NAM because we get big into gear, and then we're like, all right, hold on, what purpose is this actually doing for us? Because I mean, I think nowadays a lot of the engineers will see a new plugin will come out, and then we're like, I need it, but it's like, no, you don't.
Yeah.
Need it. Just do what you got. I mean, do what you can with what you got. So.
Yeah, NAM is insane. I probably won't ever go back to it. It's at least the way it was. Now, I don't know how they'll restructure now, but back in the day, it was so big, so many rooms, so noisy, bands playing everywhere. It drove me crazy. I've got a little ADHD and a little claustrophobia kind of thing sometimes, and it kind of scared me.
What are some things that I think you've just developed over time? Not, it could be a skill. Well, yeah, let's go with a skill. What's a skill that you've been able to just hone in on as you've worked, like as an engineer?
It's hard to describe, but one thing that pops in my head immediately is mixing. I used to mix by starting with the bass or the bass drum only, and then bringing each individual track up totally separately. And I mixed a lot of hit records that way. I'm not saying it was a bad way to do, and I'd never hear the whole song really until I had heard each individual thing and tweaked it, EQ'd, compressed whatever I was doing to each individual thing. But a few years ago, I just thought, maybe there's another way. And so I started listening, bringing everything up first, hearing the whole song, and doing a few moves to get a basic mix to the whole song with everything up at once, and then going back to individual things and not doing near as much individual tweaking, because I started thinking, well, everything you do to a sound is going to affect not only that sound, but it's going to have to blend in with the other sounds. It's going to affect them in some way. Everything is a big homogeneous family here. So I've just changed my whole way of mixing halfway through, after years of doing it a different way. So I guess that's a skill set that I changed over time. Um, One thing I really like to do when I'm recording vocals, if I'm in a studio that has a good enough outboard gear and enough of it, I like to do what I call an EQ sandwich. I'll get the vocal mic, I'll put it through a compressor, then I'll put it through set a certain way to catch a lot of the instantaneous loud peaks. Then I'll go through an equalizer that I will set for a basic sound, but I'm ready to change it in within the song. And then I'll go to a third compressor. So the EQ is sandwiched in between two compressors. Neither compressor is doing a lot of work. Like it's not just pounding into the end. but each one is doing its own little bit of work. And I just found that really worked well for me. I know recording Lenny Kravitz, I did that on all of his stuff, and I would even be sitting there with the volume knob, the mic pre the volume in one hand, and EQ that I knew we were going to need in the other hand, and I would have learned the song, and I'm actually changing the volume as he sings. In other words, me as a manual compressor,
Yeah.
so that when I knew he was going to hit a loud thing, I would already be down a little. When I knew he would go to a falsetto, I would be hitting the EQ a certain way because it was different from the full voice. So I just sort of developed that skill set over years of of doing things live to the vocal as we record it, and I love doing that. Sometimes you can't if you don't have enough gear, or you're just stuck in an overdub room, But I don't know. I don't think of the things I do as skill sets really. I just think of it as trying to make things better the best I can.
That's a good way to put it. Uh, do you have certain gear that you really like? You're talking about your EQ sandwich. Did you have a certain compressor, a certain EQ?
I do, but it's hard to find it because it's my own gear that's I've been had purposely made. I've got a company I call Lucas Engineering, and we've made uh, tube and transformer compressors, tube and transformer equalizers, mic pre's, microphones. I mean, I basically wanted all of my own gear
Mm,
done the way I wanted it. So I would be recording with my Lucas microphone into my Lucas compressor number one, into my Lucas EQ, into the Lucas compressor number two. Just so it's not, I love my own gear. And it's because I had people, I didn't build it myself in a shop, but I came up with the ideas of things I wanted and got great tech people to design it. They'd bring me a prototype. I'd say, what about this? Would change a few little things. So I would develop my own gear and they would make it for me. I would pay for it, of course, occasionally. And then we've sold a lot to other people as well. So there's others out there, Lucas branded, like there's at least 300 plus Lucas microphones out there in the world in a lot of big studios, not all of them, but in LA and England, all over the place. Lincoln Center in New York uses Lucas microphones for their jazz recordings. So a lot of the gear is other places, but we're not making any right this minute. There's none for sale now unless you find something used. So it's hard. I'm not trying to promote it or sell it. I'm just saying that's the gear I love the most. Now I based the compressor on my favorite all time, which is a Universal Audio 176, UA 176, which is a tube and transformer compressor.
mm.
There's the 1176, which is a later UA model, which was transistorized. It's okay for what it does, but it's not a 176. But I would base the microphones that we built, Lucas microphones, on Neumann U47s or other great microphones. Didn't clone them. We just tried to make the very best mic in that general style that could be made today, whatever it costs to make it. So yeah, my favorite gear is still old vintage gear, or the ones I had remade for me.
Is there, I guess, a certain tone that you feel like can't be duplicated with digital stuff that you had back then? I mean, obviously the tape is a certain tone, but there's something
Yeah,
else.
tape adds to that. I think overloading, or maybe not really overloading, but putting just a little bit of stress on tube gear. The tube gear back in those days was designed so well, so beautifully. It was state of the art when they built the end of the tube gear era. The stuff they were making was incredibly well built, built like tanks, and a lot of the gear was built regardless of the cost. They weren't trying to make a lot of money making Fairchild compressors or the UA stuff or things like that necessarily. They were trying to make really good gear out of the best parts available. Nowadays, a lot of gear is built to a price point. They know now. Back in those days, people weren't at home recording.
Mm,
People didn't buy a studio quality microphone for themselves, unless studios did, record companies did. So it's very different now. So a lot of companies are making mics that look a lot like a U47, let's say, but it may not sound a whole lot like it really did. But I do think the sound that's hard to beat and the hardest to replicate in digital is tubes and transformers being pushed right to their limit. Not necessarily distorting it, but really just pushing it to where it was intended to go. And that's very hard. People are making distortion plugins now. Everybody puts a distortion plugin all over everything, but that's not really what that tube gear did. It didn't really distort. Tape didn't really distort if you used it properly. It just did a little bit of extra compression, and things were they designed things back then to be as flat and as perfect as possible. It didn't always reach that because of limitations of metal and gear and things. But those pieces of gear from the 50s, 60s, in those eras, really, even the 40s, some of it, uh, in good shape. If you get it really good shape and push it to its limits that it was intended to do, very hard to replicate now.
I have a couple friends that are engineers at Sun Studio, and
Sure.
they talk about people will come in there and they specifically want that gear. And I was asking them, I was like, y'all are still using like all the old stuff? She was like, yeah, we use it all the time.
Absolutely, sure. If you
Love
go
it.
in any big studio these days, of course, a lot of studios have closed. I mean, it's not the industry's not what it used to be, and it's both bad and good. So things change. But if you go in a big studio that has two or three or four rooms, and it's where the record plant type thing, where everybody goes and rents and pays a lot of money, you will see it full of tube and transformer vintage gear, a lot of it. And that's the thing people, I want five of this and four of that and three of that. And I want the old Neumann mics. That's what everybody goes to get. Doesn't mean you can't make great records with brand new modern day gear. You can, it doesn't matter really, but that's what people want. It's just how you use it and what you do with it.
Yeah, I mean it's really all about the sound you're trying to get. Like you could be a great engineer for a certain type of sound, but if you can't even hear it, like you were saying, you heard the notes being off, but not everybody else does. You have to be a certain type of person to have the certain type of ear to get the certain type of sound. And
True. That is true.
so I remember you were talking about when you went to Abbey Road. How was that different than being in America working with American music, or was it pretty similar?
Excuse me. I'd say for the most part similar, but of course, being in England, they had their own purpose-built equipment, their own custom in-house built equipment. A lot of it before they changed to SSL and Neve boards, all of their consoles were built in-house by their own engineers.
Wow.
So, but by the time I got there, I was working on Neves and SSLs, but which are English made equipment, but in the US it's all over the place in big studios too. But it was pretty much the same. What was really different about Abbey Road, you can't avoid the Beatleness of everything. I mean, it's the first time I went to Abbey Road was not to work as an engineer. It's when they were putting in the SSL for the first time, taking out their in-house built equipment. And as they closed down for a month or two, they made a museum out of the Studio 2, where the Beatles did most of their gear, most of their recording, and had chairs set up, and they showed videos, and all the equipment the Beatles used was there. I was fortunate to get a ticket and go in and see it. Not a lot of people got to go through that short-term exhibit, but I went in there and they said, well, these are the chairs the orchestra set in when they played on the Day in the Life. This is the drum kit Ringo played. This is the piano that was on Lady Madonna. And there's all these, which is fun to see and do. But I forgot where I was going on that. Anyway,
I was just
forgot the
asking
question.
about the difference between working there in Abbey Road and then working here.
Yeah, and so then a few years later, I came back as an engineer producer, rented the studio for a year, and recorded several acts in there. And I got to know every inch of the building, every inch of the place. I'd be the last one there, except for the guard on the front door, last one to leave every night. Because I do work hard, long and hard. You know, whatever it takes, I'm going to do it. So I would spend some of those hours when no one else was there, walking around and just absorbing all the Beatleness of it. But of course, lots more has been done in Abbey Road than the Beatles. That's where the Star Wars music was recorded, the John Williams orchestra and all that. Operas are done in there. Winston Churchill came in and did speeches there during the war. I mean, lots of stuff has been done there. But pretty much, I think any big rental studio has many similarities to any other because everybody knows you're to expect in that day a big console, lots of outboard gear, good mics, set up a certain way, certain type of acoustics in the room. You know, it varies, sure, but there's a general quality of it that everyone expected. So it wasn't that much different. What what somebody told me once was a little different was I was working at a studio in London called Mayfair, and the engineer there who was working helping me because you always get someone who knows the studio to be with you. You know, where the patch bay, where the patch cords kept, all these, you know, where do you keep your mics, all that kind of stuff, that knows how things are all plugged together. But he said to me, you work different than the English producers. And I said, different how? He said, well, they're always looking for technical solutions. You're looking for musical solutions. And I thought, oh well, that sounds good to me. Music's what we do. I mean,
Exactly. That's what you want to look for.
that, that's why I came there.
All right. Yeah, let's go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh,
Being able to talk to you. I know I don't seem like I'm starstruck, but honestly, like
oh
hearing
no.
about hearing about all the people you worked with, like I would love to do that. I've been rapping and I've been producing and engineering and from start to finish everything and um just hearing about all the people you got to work with, that would be a dream, honestly. So, first
You
of
know, that's my favorite way to work, the way you work, all by myself.
all,
I love to do that, even if it's on somebody else's project. I love to put a background vocal on myself, do all mixing everything all myself. You don't always get to do it, but I say you're lucky.
well, thank you. Yeah, everybody's always like, man, I envy you. You know how to make instrumentals, and you can rap, and you can record. I'm like, it's nice, but also it's a curse because then you know
Yep.
to
Yep.
you can critique everything, and you'll overthink
You
everything.
eat it, you live it, you breathe it, you sleep it, everything.
Yeah. But so yeah, again, thank you so much for coming on. I think you have some courses that I actually wanted to sign up for. So if you could just give, do you not?
No, no, I don't have any courses,
Oh, I
but
thought you had courses.
no, no, I don't do that. What I do lecture at several places that are recording academies,
Mhm.
primarily at Blackbird Academy in Nashville,
Oh yeah,
at
I've been
Blackbird
there. Great.
Studios. Great, great, great school there, and I talk to them about once a month
Okay.
and do things. But I don't have my own. And I've talked to other places and do lectures and things. But my own courses, you'll just have to run into one sometime, I guess. Anyone, I mean, anyone would, not you, but
Okay. Well, yeah, this is time. Give everybody anything that you want them to check out. I'm sure everybody's heard of some of the musicians that you worked with, so definitely listen to that music. But if there's any websites, whatever you need.
well, yeah, I do have terrymanning.com, and also I have themanninggallery.com, which is where my photography, which is my other job. I've done that as long as music and as deeply as music. So it's the other thing. I do more of that than music probably these days, although it's maybe equal. But I've got we're working now. Hopefully, it's going to come through. We've waited through a year and a half of pandemics to try to be able to make it happen. But we're working on a gigantic photo exhibit at a very big, very well-known museum. I can't say the name, of course, yet because it's not on the books yet. But we're working on that, and if it comes through like it is, it will be tremendous. Have a large number of very large modern color photographs, a whole section of, I did a whole thing on, speaking of Memphis, and I don't mean to drag on, but speaking of Memphis in the 60s, I documented a whole lot of what Memphis was like, what it looked like in restaurants, what people look like driving down the street, just things you don't think I need photos of that usually, but I thought something going on here. I just feel it. So I would take a lot, and I had a very close friend, William Eggleston, who turned into one of the most famous photographers of history. But so we talk about that a lot. But I'm going to put in the exhibit. I've got photographs of Dr. King, Martin Luther King, that I shot just hours before he was killed, and they will be in the exhibit. A whole thing of Memphis surrounding it, people listening to speeches about Dr. King with Senator Kennedy speaking and things, and so a whole big Memphis mid '60s Memphis section that we'll be doing. And then I've got photos as well of musical people that I've done: Lenny Kravitz, Dusty Springfield, Chuck Berry, a bunch of different things we'll have. So if this exhibit happens the way it looks like it will, that'll be just, I'll be so excited. That'll be fantastic, and hopefully a great thing for people to see.
Can you give away the state or area, maybe south or north?
I'm sorry, give the what?
Give away like the region, like south or north, state, anything?
It right now it would be Northeast,
Okay.
but a big city in the Northeast.
I was hoping
But
you would say like around this area.
I know. Well, if it does come together, we're also putting it. We've talking to several people about making it as a traveling exhibit because it needs to come to Memphis. We
Okay.
want to bring it. That's the next place we would come. If there's a place big enough to handle that, we could find in Memphis, we would do that, and then hopefully travel it to other places. I can't. I've said too much probably already since it's not official yet,
Okay.
but you'll hopefully be hearing about that.
Okay. Great. Great. Well, again, thanks so much for coming on, and I hope everybody gets a chance to listen to all the great stuff you worked on, and it's just been a pleasure.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, and great. Best of luck with what you're doing. It sounds great.
Thank you so much. All right. Thank you for everybody tuning in, and see you next time.